The defendant is informed that the ME's toxicology results showed fentanyl in Eric Richins' blood. The defendant said something like, "Fentanyl? What is that? Cut crack?" That's the blurt.
So if on his calendar, his iCal, he had a meeting with CL to pick up stuff, I imagine, first of all, you all would want to know that. And so would the state as potentially exculpatory evidence.
So personal and business schedules. To tell me how he ingested it on his business schedule.
Yeah, but respond to the example I just gave you. That's relevant information. It is information regarding what a person was doing or where they were going on a specific day and time.
Well, then, if that's the case, the inevitable discovery rule will swallow the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine every time.
Well, it doesn't
Why couldn't
swallow
they
it, it just eliminates it sometimes.
Okay.
I think that's the way it works. It's an exception.
Kouri Richins is back in court. Now, she wants to suppress evidence for the trial. Some of the evidence that she wants to have suppressed is the phone that was taken from her back in 2022. There were oral statements that she made a day afterwards while she was being detained while they were searching her house. And then there were more oral statements that she made when the new detective on the case came by to introduce himself. And, you know, there was some dispute about whether or not he knew if she had an attorney representing her or not. They had him testify in front of the court, I think a couple months back. And when they asked him, did you know that Kouri Richins had representation at the time? And he was like, oh, you know, I was just new in the case. I came by to basically introduce myself. And I mean, I didn't know that she had an attorney. It wasn't until halfway through, I think the mom came in and was like, oh yeah, shouldn't there be an attorney here? So they want to have those statements to the sergeant suppressed. And then also there's this interesting part, handwritten statements as well. Apparently the police, they were able to get this orange notebook that was seized from her home. Now, I wonder if this orange notebook is the same one as the diary that the state keeps referring to. Apparently Kouri Richins kept a diary the months, days leading up to Eric Richins' death. And I think afterwards too. I was trying to find exact statements about the diary, but I can't find them in my notes. I know I wrote them down. I just don't know where it is, but I just remember that they kept talking about this diary that Kouri Richins has. And I'm like, oh my gosh, please don't tell me that she was documenting her crimes. Like, oh my gosh, what is she doing? So I don't know if it's the same diary. However, initially when this diary was taken, she was trying to say that like, oh, well, that diary is actually physician-patient privilege and you guys don't have a right to go through it and look at it at all. So I think what she was trying to say was maybe she was keeping a diary to keep track of her mental health because her therapist told her to. I don't know. It sounds like bullshit to me, but you know what? The defense, when they finally, they responded to one of the state's motion, or I think they responded to the state's reply, and they decided to withdraw that physician-patient privilege from the diary because maybe it is bullshit, you know? Interesting. I don't know. Kouri Richins is the type of person who would just throw anything she can. And like, I don't know, she's just like grasping at straws here. Very interesting person. I believe the defense is going to make the argument first, and then the state's going to reply, and then defense is going to reply afterwards, and then we'll see what the judge says. But I don't think the judge made a ruling yet based on what I see on the video title. We got, I think audio feed is pretty good. The judge, I love the judge on this case. Oh my gosh, every time I'm watching this, I'm like, I look forward to the judge. I look forward to the prosecutor. Mr. Bloodworth, the state prosecutor in this case, oh my gosh, reading his motions are so fucking entertaining. It reminds me of the Ben Chu motions back in the Det v. Heard case. Ben Chu was always very snarky, throwing some jabs, you know. It's entertaining to read it sometimes. And I think the defense was like, yo, what the fuck? This guy's really coming after us. So we need to, when we reply back to him, we need to be just as snarky, because at first when I was reading some of the defense's motion, she has like new attorneys now that started representing her about, it's been almost like half a year now. I feel like when I was reading their motions are just like, you know, they're just writing their motions and stuff like that. I feel like they weren't really throwing too much jabs at the state. But like when the state was amping it up a little bit, I think the defense decided to amp it up too. And then like now there's like blowing jabs at each other in these motions. So it's very entertaining to read. But if I was on the receiving end, I don't know, man, I might start crying or something like that.
With defendant's motion to suppress statements and evidence, that's docket 747. Who's arguing this one for the defense? Business.
Is that Miss Nestor?
So it's 4 categories or 4 buckets, right?
Yes, sir.
The first is a request for an order suppressing all evidence obtained from a phone that was seized from, I mean, the motion says Ms. Richins' person, but that's not actually what you think happened.
Correct.
On April 13, 2022.
Correct.
Right. They said that the phone was actually left in the car. Kouri Richins was pulled out of the car while they were searching her home. And then afterwards, they're like, oh, hey, like, go get your phone. And she went to her car, grabbed her phone. And then the defense said that apparently the detectives made Kouri Richins unlock her phone and told her that she wasn't free to go at that point.
Correct. That's their theory, that it was seized from her person.
Right.
Not mine.
Can I ask you about
Yes.
Detective Maynard and Detective Woody's testimony and see if you see it differently?
Okay.
I love this judge.
I look at their testimony and I see that Ms. Richins is approaching her home. Detective Maynard stops her.
She was leaving her the home. I think.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, all right. He stops her, puts her in the front seat of his vehicle and says, you got to wait with me for a few minutes, right?
Right.
He observes her phone in her car.
Right.
Either he tells Detective Woody or she also observes the phone in Ms. Richins' car.
That was not explained.
Okay. But at some point, Detective Woody knows the phone is in the car.
Hi, Melissa.
Because after Detective Maynard says, you can go, Detective Woody says, hey, do you want to walk over to the car and give me your phone?
Yeah.
And then eventually, Ms. Richins reaches in, grabs the phone, gives it to Detective Woody.
Correct.
This
I don't know what's been going on, but I haven't been having any acne breakout lately. I'm trying to figure out what it is. I'm like, is it my diet? Is it like, what's going on here? Because I've definitely been drinking, especially when I went to Italy. I was drinking wine when I was there. Usually wine might dry out my skin and stuff like that, but I'm trying to figure out what it is right now because I've been having clear skin. I mean, I still have all the acne scars that I got to get rid of, but I'm like, oh my gosh, clear skin. Oh, it's so nice. Why have they never identified her boyfriend? Did they say her paramour? They actually have. We have the boyfriend's name. It was mentioned, Mr. Grossman, that's the last name, was mentioned in some of the other hearings before. And then I read oh gosh, I don't remember where. I think it was one of the state's court docs where they literally said the paramour's name. I think his name is like Robert Grossman or something like that. But they barely mentioned him. But his full name was mentioned in one of the recent state court docs. So we know who he is. I wonder if he's going to be testifying for the trial. It'll be very interesting. It's always interesting to hear them testify, you know, the paramours. Oh, you're doing the hammer stuff in Monster Hunter? Fun. Do they still have the little mochi thing with the little cats dancing when you order the food? I know, the judge's voice is chocolate. Chai, how are you doing today? Oh my god, Chai, your baby looks so cute. She's like a real human being now. Like, oh my gosh, she's so adorable. She's got like little twinkly, sparkly eyes. Thank you so much for this 68 months. I appreciate your support, Chai. Thank you so much. Thank you. You haven't heard of it? Yeah, they don't really mention it very often, but it's like it'll pop up here and there. Like you'll hear like Grossman in some of the hearings, and then the full name was written in one of the states' motion. We might cover that motion today or a different video. I'm trying to see what they are going to cover in the court. If it's pertinent, then I'll cover the motions today. If it's not, I might just do a separate video or something like that.
This is happening in the context of grabs the phone, your
Okay.
phone.
Yeah.
And then eventually, Ms. Richins reaches in, grabs the phone, gives it to Detective Woody.
Correct.
This is happening in the context of a warrant to seize the phone from her person, right?
Arguably,
I think that's what it says.
because
isn't it?
my position is that would have only applied if she were in the home, the way the warrant was written. I think her person had to be in the home because the warrant is written that way. But I understand the position that they're making, that the warrant covered her person, which it did.
Right.
But if you read the warrant in context, it says at the premises of. I don't know if that makes a difference, but I think the warrant would have only applied to her person if she were actually on the premises. That's how I read the warrant.
Okay, so I have, it sounds like we agree on the facts.
You do?
Yep.
So I have two questions regarding the law.
Okay.
The warrant says what it says. Why isn't the scope of that warrant sufficient to allow them to seize the phone that was within her reach, undisputably, when she was in the vehicle when they stopped her? Second, even if that's not the case, why doesn't the automobile exception say they can grab the phone that is plainly in view in that automobile before they give her the car back to drive away?
Well, the first question about why they couldn't have seized it from her when they first pulled her over. Okay, the fact is they didn't, and a detention intervened between when they pulled her over and could have voluntarily asked her for her phone.
Doesn't that detention just maintain the status quo, though?
No, the detention requires probable cause and Miranda, which was not given. So,
Well, we'll get to that in a second, yeah.
right. You're talking about the seizure right now, just the phone?
Yeah.
Okay. So, when she was first pulled over, it is my understanding from my recollection of Detective Maynard's testimony that he said it was in the console or on the console of her car.
Yeah,
Now, just to recap for you guys again really quickly, police had a search warrant to search her house. So police came and they saw Kouri Richins leaving the property and they were like, oh, wait, that's Kouri Richins. And so while there were cops searching the house, one of the police officers like U-turned and then pulled Kouri Richins over, turned the lights on, and basically was like, oh, hey, like you're, I guess they told her she was like under custody. And so they took her from her car. Her phone was left in the car, by the way. Took her from the car and then brought her back to where the property was. And then at some point they were like, oh, hey, go get your phone. So she went back to her car, got the phone, and then went back to law enforcement.
as I understood, it was like sitting in the cup holder in between the seats.
Which is actually not on her person. That's in her vehicle,
Fair enough, but it's within her reach.
right? But it's not contraband and it's not a gun.
Well, it's not a gun.
Right.
I'm not sure it's not contraband. Here, we have a warrant to investigate aggravated murder, right?
Right.
Elements of that crime include pecuniary gain and administration of poison. Securing fentanyl is analogous to drug distribution. And in the drug distribution line of cases, phones.
I just want to let you guys know that the court audio cuts off a little bit because whenever someone's not speaking, basically the microphone cuts off. So sometimes if there's like a long pause between the judge's words, it might cut off like the beginning of his words. In case you guys are like, oh, what the fuck is going on? Why does it sound weird? Hi, Marie. How are you doing today? How's it going? And I think the defense was trying to argue that contraband is something that constitutes, like I think she was trying to say that it's not contraband. The phone is not contraband because contraband is something that's like, I forgot what, oh God, I wish I had their motion. They like cited a case where contraband was like, I think it was like guns or drugs or like CP or I forgot what it was. I'm gonna have to look it up if it's bothering me.
Phones are contraband.
Well, they've said under sworn testimony that at the time this warrant was being executed, she wasn't a suspect.
Well,
That's their own testimony.
fair, but the same witness, I think we're talking about Detective O'Driscoll, right?
Right.
He says we had three possibilities.
Right.
Accident, suicide,
Right.
murder.
Right.
One of those three possibilities involves securing and administering a poison. So why isn't the phone contraband? Under probable cause that it was used to communicate with sources of controlled substances that were used.
At the time, they did not know what was on the phone. They had no idea what was on the phone.
Well, certainly, that's why they want to seize and
Right.
search it.
Right. The warrant gave them a realm of authority of how to get the phone. They didn't use that authority. They pulled her over, left the phone in a vehicle that was not covered under the warrant at all, removed her from the vehicle. Why they did or didn't do it, that was their choice. They also could have left her at the house that the warrant covered, and that was their choice to let her leave the home and pull her over 2 blocks away, out of the side of the house. So that was all their decision-making process. Once they put her in that police car, the phone is no longer on her person. They haven't seized it yet. It's in a vehicle that's not covered by a warrant. They know that too. So the only way they know...
Oh, I found it. Sorry, it was bothering me. The state asserts, this is a defense's reply, by the way. The state asserts that the Carroll Doctrine would have been enabled them to search the car without a warrant. The Carroll Doctrine only applies when there is contraband suspected to be in the vehicle. In other words, something which cannot be lawfully possessed, like drugs, CP, etc. A cell phone is not contraband, therefore the Carroll Doctrine is inapplicable in this case. However, it seems like from the statements that the judge has made so far, it seems like he's leaning towards the phone being contraband. So he needs to have her explain why it's not contraband. Hello?
it's not covered by a warrant.
Hi,
They
Nicole.
know that too. So the only way, they know they can't reach in and get it, so they direct her to do it. They don't give her an option.
I think they could have reached in and gotten it under the automobile exception, couldn't they?
Well, it's not an arrest. She's not under, they didn't have a warrant for her arrest. There's no automobile exception.
Well, no, but they're about to hand the car back to her when they release her from the detention.
Right? Even
And
a
they know
stronger
the
argument.
evidence that the warrant is covering is in the car. Wouldn't the automobile exception, well, you're allowed to seize it so that they don't run away with it.
But they didn't. They didn't seize the car. They gave her the
No,
keys.
no, I'm sorry. Pronoun trouble. My apologies.
Right.
The phone.
The phone they can't just pull out under the automobile exception if they're handing her back the keys and saying drive back to your house. They have to go in and search the car to get the phone. They have to enter the vehicle with their hands and grab the phone. So that's why they told her to do it. And at the time they told her to do that, it was not on her person. So it was not on her person. It was not covered by a warrant. It was not in connection with an arrest. There's no arrest warrant. There's a detention for purposes of Miranda analysis and for custodial analysis, but there's not an arrest. So there's no automobile exception here. She wasn't being detained. The car wasn't being seized. None of that automobile exception law applies. So what they did was searched a vehicle using her hands to do it, directing her to hand them something out of a vehicle they did not have authority to grab, and they grabbed it. And that's our position.
Okay. Let's stay with that time frame.
Okay.
Okay. Between when Detective Maynard stops her and when he says, okay, you can get out of the car and go back to your car, and Detective Woody says, you can go back to the house if you want. Do you want to come with me and get your phone? Okay,
Right.
so that time period.
Well, she actually said Maynard was going to follow her back.
Fair enough.
So still in detention, basically.
Yeah. Candidly, I think there is a break. I think you have a fair point that a reasonable person would objectively believe that they were detained during that period of time between the stop, Maynard saying you can't go yet, and then, okay, you can go now. I agree.
I wish a certain judge would learn from the manners of this judge. I think this judge does a really good job at doing the back and forth with the attorney without having it be super contentious, and not being super aggressive and rude. I like the way he does things. And then like he'll say things too to acknowledge like, hey, like you have a good argument for this. However, how about this argument? What do you have to say about this? I don't know. I like the way that he does things. I like how the way he communicates with attorneys. It's like a good back and forth, and we don't feel like the judge just hates whichever attorney's on the other side. Certain judge.
Agree with you. That was a period in which she was in custody.
Definitely.
I think it ends when they give her the car back.
Except for the fact that Woody says he will follow you back, which doesn't give her an option to go to the store. It says go back and he's following you, which he did. He followed her back in a police car
Isn't
with
there
lights.
a line from that recording, though, where I think it's in the transcript, where Detective Woody says, I don't know, you go wherever you want, go shopping if you need to.
But then after that, she says he's going to follow you back.
Okay.
So
I don't know that rises to the level of custody. I mean, no guns were drawn, no handcuffs, no show of force. Like, they're giving her the car back.
she pulls up to her house, and I believe Detective Maynard testified there were at least 10 uniformed officers all in her driveway. An officer comes up to her, holding her own possession that he took from her, and says, give me your passcode. There was no, would you like to give me your passcode? Would you like to help me in my investigation of you? You have a choice here. You have Miranda rights. It was give me your passcode from an armed police officer while surrounded by armed police officers in a house after she had just been detained for 20 minutes.
Didn't you skip a couple of steps there, though? Wasn't it, hey, I need to get some numbers out of my phone. Okay, give me your passcode.
Maynard disagreed with that. He said she didn't ask for numbers, that he just asked her for the passcode. I'm quite sure of that.
Okay, my apologies.
No worries. He said he just came straight up to her and asked her for the passcode. That was his testimony. And then according to his own report,
Do we have body cam? I think we have some recordings. I don't know if the recordings from this day though. Do we have body cam though? God, I love watching body cam stuff. I really like the way, yeah, right? I really like this judge. I like the way he talks out his thoughts. Yeah, listens to the lawyers, making things as clear as possible. Yes, Marie, I agree with you. I totally agree. I love judges like this. I love judges that are inquisitive. I also like the new judge in Koberger's case as well. Apparently, he's an appeal judge, so the way that he conducts his court is kind of like an appeal, an appeal process. Basically, the attorneys will talk, and then like sometimes the judge will interrupt and like ask questions. It'll be like back and forth, which is, I don't know. I think it's really interesting to watch that. It's kind of a way to see what the judge is thinking and where they're at, and then maybe at some point maybe they will change their mind later down the road as the attorney's trying to convince them. But at this point, it seems like the judge is not leaning towards the defense's argument.
she was then released from his custody once she gave him the passcode.
Right. Now, he explained that we can acknowledge that he explained that he misused that word, custody.
I'm sure he thinks that now.
He also said after I gave Kouri the numbers, I didn't have any other interactions with Kouri. It wasn't that he just grabbed the passcode and walked away. He gave her the numbers she wanted out of the phone.
Hold on just 1 minute.
Wait, he gave her the number she wanted on the phone.
So the testimony was that he asked for the passcode, and he testified that he did it to enable them to get access to the phone.
Right.
She gave him the passcode, and then shortly thereafter, she said, hey, there's some numbers in there. Can I get the numbers? And he said yes, and that was his last interaction with Kouri. I believe that's the testimony.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, are we moving with the orange notebook?
Okay. The notebook.
The notebook?
The orange notebook.
Is this notebook the diary? That's what I want to know. Or is this notebook something completely different? Something tells me this is the diary one, though. Jesus, imagine keeping a diary that could be used against you later on in court.
Sir?
Which I think is the fourth category, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So the first category is
Oh,
the
no, no,
phone.
I skipped one.
Second category is her giving the passcode,
Right.
that testimonial without Miranda.
Well, and the way you put it, everything else she said, if anything, at the home,
Correct.
right?
And
I skipped over Detective O'Driscoll at the house on a
Yes.
different day.
Yes.
Okay, so coming back, I think there's no dispute, right? No guns drawn, no handcuffs. Consistent with my prior rulings on a different motion, the Sixth Amendment has not attached.
I believe that's probably correct, although I would like to make the position for the record that I think applying for the warrant may have triggered the Sixth Amendment. I realize that would be new law, but I would like to stand by that position.
You've preserved it for the record. Then when we come to the Fifth Amendment,
Wait, so let's see. So I think they're trying to say that she was not in custody, so the Sixth Amendment didn't attach. I always get Sixth and Fifth Amendment mixed up. Okay, Fifth Amendment is the self-incrimination one. Sixth Amendment, speedy trial. Oh, the counsel one. I think that's what applies to Kouri Richins here.
tell me why a reasonable person would objectively believe that they were detained while that interview at their home was happening. It's at her home. Her mother's present for at least part of it. There's no show of force.
Right.
There's nothing limiting her from being like, I got to go check on the kids. I need to go pick one of the kids up. I need to go shopping. I just don't want to talk to you anymore.
Right. Well, I mean, I recognize that officers are allowed under the law to use trickeries to some degree, but originally when they came into the house, it was, oh, we just want to introduce ourselves to you. We're trying to investigate, not being honest that they were there.
They
to
are
talk
expressly
to
allowed
her.
to do that.
Correct.
Yes.
I just conceded that.
Yeah.
However, there was a point at the interview where they do start
I'm detecting a little frustration here.
getting her to talk about things that are, clearly she has a right to assert. At that point, she has two officers sitting in her house. They are armed. They have advised that they're there. They have not told her you can end this whenever you want. They've not read her Miranda. They've not said you're free to go. And they continue the interrogation.
Can you cite me to any case that they had any duty to do any of that if she wasn't in custody?
Well, the question is whether she was in custody, right? If she believed she was not free to leave.
But if we look at Levin, as talked about in Fuller, right? There's just no objective indications that she's detained.
Well, you don't have to be in the police station to be in custody. You have two investigating detectives sitting there filming her, knowing that she had an attorney, which we've now established, because she said it to them.
Is that established, though? I could have sworn we had 3 hearings about this where the detective was like, no, I didn't know that she had an attorney, or I wasn't told that she had an attorney. I'm new to this case. And like, what, did you look at the case file? He's like, oh, no, I'm still new. I'm still looking over everything. I haven't gone through everything yet. I just went over there to introduce myself to her.
In the first, even before they got to the house, I pose that now we know even before they got to the house, they knew she had an attorney,
Fine.
Despite what he testified to. But once
okay.
they got
Despite what he testified to. Okay, so there is a disagreement there.
in the house, that she asserted within the first 7 pages of the transcript, she referred to her attorney.
Okay.
So now they know that this is the same attorney that has previously asserted that she did not want her client interviewed outside of her presence. They have that in the case file. They've had conversations about that with the supervisor, according to our recent investigation. And they still continue to question her, knowing that a right to counsel has previously been asserted. So our position was that they either should have told her she still was under her assertion and was she withdrawing her assertion, made sure she knew she had her rights. They didn't do that.
Okay. I understand your position.
Yeah.
All right. The Orange Notebook.
Yes.
The state has conceded that when it was initially seized and opened, there was no warrant allowing them to do that.
Correct.
They then go on to argue, but wait a minute. There were subsequently multiple warrants that specifically referenced documents. for the home in which the notebook was seized and opened,
Right.
and that they laid a foundation through the trustee, I forget that gentleman.
Hey man, here's the thing. If law enforcement, if they want to come into your house and start talking to you and you had a husband that died about a year ago, they're like, oh, you know what? I'm sorry, you guys can't come in. I'm too busy. No, don't be coming in here. I don't know, man. But people don't know their rights, and they're like, oh, we see law enforcement. Okay, come on in, have some cookies, have some tea, and then you blab away, and then all of a sudden, that's gonna be used against you later on in court.
Gentleman's capacity, but the caretaker
Wife
of the
of the
home.
trustee.
Yeah.
I mean, the husband, I'm
of
sorry.
trustee.
The husband of the trustee.
And they laid a factual foundation for nobody goes in that home without me. And the people that went in, if at all, were not there and did not rearrange anything like the orange notebook. So the status quo of that notebook would have been preserved until those subsequent warrants are referencing documents.
So here's my
Would have been
concern about that.
maintained.
Here's my concern about that. As you'll recall, when Detective O'Driscoll was on the stand, I specifically asked him, and you'll remember he had a complete absence of memory when I asked him this, but I specifically asked him on numerous occasions, what were these other warrants for? What were you looking for? I don't remember. I think a go bag on one of them. I can't recall. What about the warrant you saw a month ago? I can't recall. You can't remember what you did a month ago? No, I can't. So I could never get him to say the nature of what they were looking for when they had those 3 warrants. Now, documents could apply to People magazine. It could apply to your shopping list on the counter. It could apply.
I'd be mortified if my journal was read aloud to the world. Oh man, journal entries or what was the one with Jodi Arias again, where they voice messages? I think she had like voice messages, and then they also had recordings of their sex stuff too. That was just like played out loud in court. It was just like, oh my god, what the fuck?
Apply to advertisements for the pest control service down the street. Realistically, when you say a
But
warrant,
all of those things are limited by, and ultimately I think would be excluded by, the inherent limitation on the face of the warrant. That
That's
the
what-
scope is for investigation of aggravated murder, not for buying People magazine or pest services.
but that's my point though. There's no way that they would have known, seeing an orange notebook in a drawer, that had anything to do, and we submitted still had nothing to do with what happened to Mr. Richins.
Well, but hold on.
So, like I said, I'm not sure, but I think this orange notebook is Kouri Richins' diary that initially law enforcement, when they were searching the house, I think they came across the orange notebook and they opened it and they were like, oh, wait, shit, I got to close it back up and get another warrant for this. So I think they conceded that right there was something that they shouldn't have done. However, the state did argue that, well, that orange notebook would have been discovered at some point anyways, because they would have got more warrants later on down the road. And at some point they would have discovered the orange notebook anyways. That's the argument. But she's saying that like, well, it's just an orange notebook. How would they know to go after the orange notebook? I don't know. I have no idea.
And this will come up later, perhaps.
Right.
See what the judge says.
But again, they're investigating aggravated murder.
Right.
One of the elements would be for pecuniary gain.
Right.
Monetary.
That requires investigation into the defendant's financial condition and financial transactions. And that's a realm in which documents in a home could be highly probative.
But an orange spiral children's school notebook, how is that going to be flagged if they hadn't already illegally opened it, read it twice?
Well, it was
Despite,
flagged the first time, so it's reasonable to say it would have been flagged ultimately.
well, I mean, I think that's supposition. I mean, we don't know that. And they did not have any independent source to suggest that anything in that notebook had anything to do with this. And we actually submitted.
Well, actually, if you are looking through someone's house and it is for financial fraud stuff, you would probably go through any paperwork, any paper trail that they might have, documents and all that stuff. Even if it was like a kid's looking notebook, right? You never know. People try to hide their evidence.
It doesn't have anything to do with it. It was,
Maybe, but that's a 401 issue.
right,
Okay, we'll get there.
yes.
I guess what I'm saying is, would you acknowledge that if they had the second, third, and fourth warrant they got on the day they were executing the first one, that they would have been able to open that notebook to see whether or not it had evidence of, for example, the pecuniary gain element of an aggravated murder charge?
Yes, if the first 2 warrants hadn't preceded it. Because my position is the first 2 warrants tainted every warrant that came after it.
I take this argument seriously, but I didn't see any foundation for the probable cause statements for warrants 2, 3, and 4 included information they learned when they improperly opened the orange notebook.
Well, warrant 2 absolutely did. Warrant 2 was the second warrant that he got while he was there, while they were there that day, just to cover the notebook.
Okay.
So he specifically referred in that warrant to the
Can you give me
information.
an exhibit number on that one?
Yes. it
Your Honor, I
is.
think we're talking about two different number twos, if you will.
Yeah.
The state has conceded that the search on May 8th, the
Mr. Bloodworth. I love Mr. Bloodworth.
initial search, was outside the scope of a warrant. There was a second warrant issued on May 8th. The state has conceded that that second warrant beared information from the first search that exceeded the scope.
Right.
The state then references 4 warrants that occurred much later in time.
May 31, October 31, November 6, and December 16.
I'm sorry, I thought you were
Jesus.
talking about the second. I thought
I
you meant number
apologize.
2.
No.
Okay. All right.
I was insufficiently precise there.
No
So
worries.
4 subsequent search warrants between May 31, 2023.
I love this judge. You know, I love this judge. Instead of blaming and pointing his fingers at defense attorneys or any attorneys, he's like, you know what? It's my fault. I wasn't specific. Love this guy.
And December 16, 2024. Did those probable cause statements include any content from the orange notebook? I didn't see any foundation for that.
I don't think so, but I mean, if this is what they can do, then why couldn't you always remove a taint by just issuing so many warrants that eventually the taint's gone and you would get it? I mean, the taint's there from the beginning till the end is my position. Once they open that notebook and looked at it, that's it. It's been illegally seized for all time. And I don't think just going and getting 6 more warrants for the exact same home over the space of a year and finding nothing, nothing, and nothing justifies removing the taint. I just don't think it does.
I gave this some thought, and this is not the best hypothetical, but bear with me.
Okay.
Imagine that they were investigating drug distribution. And while doing that, they seized a stolen motorcycle without a warrant.
Right.
And they're like, rats. So then they went and wrote a warrant for stolen vehicles. Lo and behold, look at that. We would have found it anyways. That clearly would not be permissible, right? Because the whole basis for asking for the other warrant was information that they seized and obtained without the scope. Here, this isn't that. The subsequent warrants are much more broad than that and have a factual nexus to the crime that was under investigation the whole time.
But at that point, the notebook's in their possession. So why does it nunc-pro-tunc go back and eliminate the taint from when they seized it? Because there's subsequent warrants that they issued.
It wouldn't necessarily do that, but I'm not sure if we take out the first 2 warrants that you've shown that anything that occurred between seizing the notebook improperly on May 8 and the warrant on May 31 or October 31 creates any taint.
Well, then, if that's the case, the inevitable discovery rule will swallow the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine every time.
Well, it
I mean, why
doesn't
couldn't they
swallow it, it
do-
just eliminates it sometimes.
Okay.
I think that's the way it works. It's an exception.
Your Honor, we stand by our position that there was no independent source that that notebook held any significance ever. The officer himself could not say that when they went in those other warrants after May 8th, that they were looking for a notebook, that they were looking for handwritten documents. He didn't say any of that. He said all he could remember was looking for a go bag, which, I mean, it was specifically referred to in the indictment. The warrant. And then the other ones, he had no recollection at all of what they were looking for. So I'm not convinced there would have been inevitable discovery. I think it takes supposition upon supposition upon supposition to say that they definitely would have opened the notebook, they would have found it, they would have found it significant, and for all
Why
this.
is that? On May 8th, before they found it, they didn't know it was there, right?
Right.
So why isn't the fact that they didn't know it was there before they found it on May 8th and found it on May 8th, why isn't that evidence that if they had gotten the warrant on May 8th that they eventually got on May 31, it would have played out the same way?
Because you,
They were
depending on
just
what they were-
doing a broad search in part of an investigation of
Well, that's what we couldn't.
aggravated kidnapping.
That's what we couldn't get information on, is what were they searching for? If this was a notebook in a bedside drawer and they were searching for office paperwork, they may never have opened that drawer. That's what I could not get the officer to testify to because he refused to remember anything they did in the investigation. So had he remembered, then maybe that's a good point. But apparently, it's their burden to have a foundation that they were looking for handwritten school children notebooks. And they don't have that. And so we have to assume that if they were looking for a certain type of document, which I kept asking him, then they would have gone to where that document would be located, an office, in the garage, in the kitchen, but maybe not in the bedroom. So I just think it's a step too far to assume it would have been found, opened, read, and digested as significant. I think that it's just too far to go.
She's annoying me, but to be fair to her, she's trying damage for her client. Yeah. Be hard for me to be like ever be an attorney because I feel like I wouldn't be able to argue something wholeheartedly. Like the way they argue is so passionate. I fucking love it. But at the same time, it's like in my mind, if I truly don't think what I'm arguing is really, if I don't really believe in it wholeheartedly, like 100%, it would be so hard for me to be up there and like just like be super passionate. Yeah. And I think also the reason why you probably find her annoying is because the judge has just been like super chill, and comparing her to the judge, she's a little bit more spicier. So it seems like it's unwarranted. But you know, I get it. She's really, I think she's really annoyed with like the testimony of like the detectives.
Garage in the kitchen, but maybe not in the bedroom. So I just think it's a step too far to assume it would have been found, opened, read, and digested as significant. I think that it's just too far to go, and that the taint stands as it is right now.
Okay, I understand your position. All right, it's your motion. You get the last word on this one. Let me hear from the state.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so they decide to separate the videos. We're gonna go to the state now. Mr. Bloodworth, I believe, is gonna be arguing. Do I have it sped up? Oops. Let's slow it down. He speaks pretty fast.
Does the state sitting here today intend to admit any words that Ms. Richins said during the period when she was in Detective Maynard's car?
I don't know why the captions aren't showing up. They're on. Caption on. I don't know.
Through when she got back in her own vehicle.
Your Honor, the state intends to admit blurts.
Okay.
The state does not intend to admit any responses to any form of interrogation or any question designed to elicit a testimonial statement.
Do those blurts come after Detective Maynard said something?
No, Your Honor. The blurts come in response to Detective Woody explaining why.
Maybe if I refresh her, because the captions are on the right side, but they're just not appearing on the screen.
Mr. Bloodworth, can I just ask you a practical question?
Yes, sir.
Sorry.
Does the state sitting here today
Okay, so the state is going to admit blurts, not any responses to any type of interrogation of any form. Where was I? I don't know. Something about Detective Woody. I think I'm around here. Okay. Oh, it's here. I just had to refresh it. Nice. Yay, we got the captions here. Hi, Brian.
Explaining
How are
why
you?
they're there.
How's it going?
Okay.
They're not questions. They weren't designed to elicit a response. It was the defendant trying to publish a narrative.
Okay.
Ain't she a good storyteller?
I think that whole time, though, is not a custodial interrogation within the meaning of the word as it relates to the Fifth Amendment.
Put the interrogation piece aside for a moment. I think a reasonable person would not have believed they were free to go during that period of time.
Your Honor, possibly, but that's only one of the four Stansbury factors. And even if the court were to make that finding that a reasonable person didn't think they were free to go, that does not mean there is custody within the meaning of the Fifth Amendment.
Well, if they're not free to go, and a law enforcement officer starts asking them questions designed to elicit responses related to the investigation,
Sure.
starts to look like a Fifth Amendment problem.
Your Honor, well, you've brought interrogation back into...
Indeed.
When we were isolating custody. But I think the court does need to analyze, it is custodial interrogation. I don't know if we can break those two kind of concepts up.
Well, the reason I say we could break it up is I can imagine an instance where someone is detained under these circumstances to maintain the integrity of the home that's about to be searched. Detective Maynard is stone-faced, looking out the windshield, says nothing, and the person detained blurts out some relevant or damaging information.
Oh, God,
There,
what'd she
I would
say?
understand if the state was like, they weren't interrogated. They volunteered a bunch of information. Here, though, there was some back and forth, whether they were questions or prompts or just comments made by Detective Maynard or Detective Woody to keep Ms. Richins talking. I mean, the devil's in the details on that, but in terms of was she free to go, would an objective person straight up told her she was not. You need to stay with me for a bit. You gotta stay in the car for a bit. Just stay here.
Your Honor, I agree that an objective person would find they were not free to go in that instance, and I don't think that matters much, if at all, to your analysis.
It matters to the custodial part of custodial investigation.
No, Your Honor, it's objective indicia of arrest, which is different than whether or not you're free to go. In search warrant detention cases, there's routinely detentions of 3+ hours, where in most of those cases, a suspect is detained. At this point, Ms. Richins isn't a suspect, where suspects are detained for 3 or more hours, and there is no custody as it relates to the Fifth Amendment.
Yeah, but forgive me, what's the case, and it's one of the cases, I can't remember the names, there are a lot of cases cited, but one of the cases cited is a similar, sit in the front seat of my car, we'll have a conversation. But in those cases, the officer tells the suspect or the detained person, you can leave whenever you want. This is the exact opposite of that. She was told, you cannot leave.
Your Honor, the you cannot leave fact pattern is the typical fact pattern in warrant detention cases. You know, you cannot leave, you cannot go back in your house, you have to stay here. We want to safely execute this warrant or fully execute this warrant.
But typically in those situations, you don't start interviewing the suspect.
Correct, and that did not occur here, particularly with Detective Maynard, who really didn't want to, if you give the recording a fair listen, he wanted nothing to do with talking to the defendant.
No, I appreciate
He
it.
asked her if she was hot, he asked her when her kids come home from school, and he asked her who else was in the house. That was all he asked her, no other prompts.
Okay. Have you listed anywhere the blurts that you seek to admit from this time period?
Your Honor, I
I don't think so. I didn't see any of the blurts.
think we have, and I'm trying to think where. It might be in our 404B. It might be in some upcoming papers we're about to file. The blurt
Yeah,
is
I don't think I read anything about the blurts. I feel like I would have remembered the phrases because I want to know, what did she say?
essentially when the defendant is informed that the ME's toxicology results showed fentanyl in Eric Richins' blood.
This is coming from Detective Woody, right?
This is coming from Detective Woody. She said, we're searching your house. We're looking for fentanyl. It's dangerous.
Right.
You have kids coming in and out the house. The defendant said something like, fentanyl? What is that? Cut crack? That's the blurt.
Okay. That's helpful context. I appreciate that. Talk to me about the phone. Do you,
God, she pretended to not know what fentanyl was. Meanwhile, we got text messages between her and the drug dealer, and she's trying to procure it. Was she trying to say that she's procuring it for Eric because he made her do it? Because I don't know. I feel like she's had so many narratives out there. It's hard for me to keep track. Which is what? I know at some point, I think she tried to say that Eric was a drug user, a heavy drug user. She accused Eric of smuggling drugs, but then he would put it in Kouri's suitcase because he didn't give a fuck about her, and then like she might get caught or something. I don't know. She even accused Eric of like forcing her to procure drugs for her. I don't know. There's just been so many statements out there by Kouri Richins that I just don't know. It's hard to keep track. If you guys remember, let me know.
Am I summarizing your position regarding the automobile exception correctly? The automobile exception allowed law enforcement to seize the phone that was visible, we'll say in the cup holder, in the console, in the automobile, before they handed the automobile back to the person who was subject to the warrant for seizure of the phone.
Yes, Your Honor, the state agrees with the court's analysis. The state thinks the detectives could have lawfully seized that phone in many ways. I think it was voluntarily turned over. I think they could have seized it pursuant to the warrant.
Hi, Risty Lou. She didn't even write the book. She paid someone to write it and slapped her name on it. I don't know. I haven't heard anything about that. I mean, it's a kid's book. I don't think it's like long or anything like that. Should have been easy for her to write, no? I don't know. Maybe I'm underestimating writing kids' books. Yeah, she said that he was making her get them for him. Like you said, she told a bunch of stories.
I think they could have seized it pursuant to
Kouri.
the automobile exception and inevitable discovery. We ultimately got warrants for the phone as well. So
What about my question to Ms. Nestor about it's in arm's reach? I mean, is a warrant to seize some, items on a person, in the court's view, it's reasonably read as, well, that also includes stuff within arm's reach when you encounter them.
Your Honor, I think that's a correct statement of the law. I think when Detective Maynard walked up to Ms. Richins' driver's side window and saw her and the phone right there within arm's reach, he could have certainly seized it pursuant to the warrant.
Okay. in your view, is the fact that they did it after detaining her for a bit and then releasing her. Is that of any consequence?
I don't think it's of any constitutional consequence, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. Then we get to the house.
I mean, of course he's going to say that. I'm not going to make an argument for the defense. Of course, I don't think it's any. There's any constitutional consequences.
I understand the state's position to be clearly not in custody.
Correct, Your Honor. I think the court was right when it stated, even if she was in custody at the stop, there was a break.
Right.
She
Hi,
got in her
Kay.
car. It's recorded twice on the transcript of Detective Woody's audio, where Detective Woody informs the defendant, you can go anywhere and do whatever you want. And the defendant could have driven anywhere and chose to drive home. That is a break.
Okay. And then once she gets to the home, no guns drawn, no handcuffs, nobody.
Wait, Detective Woody, he tells the defendant, you can go anywhere, do whatever you want. The defendant could have driven anywhere and chose to drove home. That is a break. Was that after she gave them the phone?
We blocked her car in. There were none of the 11 factors are present.
That is correct, Your Honor. They are not present. And to touch back on the discussion of the passcode, because that's really the testimonial statement at issue here is the passcode to the phone.
Right.
I think it is clear from the context of the recorded part of the discussion at the stop, and it is clear from Detective Maynard's testimony in the court, we provided the court with a transcript, that the defendant, wanted contacts out of her phone. Detective Maynard asked her for the passcode to the phone, opened the phone, and then provided her the content.
Oh, okay. That's what the defense attorney was saying earlier, because I felt like this wasn't in any of the motions, in the defense motion or the state's reply. I felt like the defense made it seem like, well, Kouri was in custody. They were searching her house, and then they told her to go get her phone, and then they forced her to put the passcode in. And I was like, oh, sounds kind of fucky. I don't know. Forcing someone to put their passcode in? But then he's saying that the only reason why he got the passcode from Kouri is because Kouri wanted contacts out of her phone. Now, since Kouri gave him the passcode to the phone, does that mean that he's allowed to use it and search through it instead of doing the long way where they have to get this machine trying to figure out the passcode and all this stuff? Okay, we're getting this is different context.
The contacts.
How much does based on Chelsea Gibson's testimony, if I recall correctly, through the course of the investigation, the Summit County received a forensic download of the phone done without the benefit of the passcode and only accessed it after the point in time, I think at the end of 2022.
Right, because I think the other way would just be, okay, well, she's obviously not going to give us the passcode in a different world. She wouldn't have given us the passcode. We would have took it in anyways, and then got in some sort of passcode iPhone, thing where they're able to get access at some point. Knowing Kouri Richins, I don't know, her password might be 1111.
In which they had the technical ability to read it or to crack a phone without the benefit of the passcode.
That's correct, Your Honor. And I guess to the court's point that having the passcode is somewhat moot, that even if the court were to have suppressed it, the state accessed the phone ultimately without using the passcode.
Okay. All right. The Orange Notebook.
Yes, sir.
Am I understanding the state's position correctly?
You are, sir, and I think the operative point is, well, let me back up a step, right?
Back it up.
The warrant requirement, is to guard against police misconduct. And I think the court has seen, in fact, the court has signed throughout this case numerous warrants, right? I think the sheriff department's conduct in getting warrants throughout this case shows good faith, if nothing else, right? And this is no different. And the fact that a detective on the very initial May 8th search looked at the notebook gives the court every reason to believe that on any of the 4 subsequent searches, a detective, probably that very same detective, would have gone to the same notebook for the exact same reasons.
Right. Okay. The scope of the investigation was the same at all. It was the same crime, the same potential elements, right?
Correct.
As I recall, the investigation began as investigation of aggravated murder, correct?
It does, Your Honor, and the state filed the aggravated murder charge on May 8th and got that search warrant and the arrest warrant all simultaneously, all related to that same investigation.
Okay. All right, I understand the state's position. Anything else on this motion?
Not unless you have any other questions.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, that was short. Now we're going to go back to the defense. All right, defense, you got the last word. Who's arguing?
Should we talk about the... Forgive me.
Oh, is it Mr. Ramos who's going to make the argument?
Mr. Ramos, should we talk about the... Forgive me.
Sorry, trying to get the captions to show up. Mr. Ramos, welcome.
Motion to suppress electronic data.
Great.
So I looked at the cases you cited and the cases they cite, and I acknowledge that there seems to be growing suspicion about broad warrants to seize and search all of the layers of electronic data, maybe better stated surveillance, that our personal mobile devices are collecting about our movements and activities. But all of those cases then turn the corner to say, in these broad categories of cases, these broad searches are entirely appropriate. CSAM, drug distribution, chief among them.
Doesn't sound good for the
This
defense.
seems analogous to the drug distribution cases, where we have a broad investigation into a multi-element, complicated crime, aggravated.
Actually, you know what? This judge kind of reminds me of Judge Kranick, because I feel like Judge Kranick, when he talks to, when he just talks in general, it feels like he is a professor. And, you know, we found that Judge Kranick had students that I guess like, he had like law students that he was teaching, and then they came in to kind of shadow during the Sarah Boone case. I wonder I wonder if he teaches. Because I feel like the way that he talks to people, it seems very, it seems like if you're like a student, it'd be very easy to digest what he's saying. And he's very clear. He kind of goes through like the step-by-step process. I don't know. I wonder if he's like a professor maybe. Or maybe like during his like off time, he like does some like teaches or like does some courses or anything like that.
Murder involving pecuniary gain and administration of poison. Why isn't this case like the drug distribution cases in which broad warrants for comprehensive downloads of mobile devices are found appropriate?
I think it's very, very clear that when you have a drug distribution case, that phone is their mobile assistant to get everything done.
But this case involves an element of that.
It involves an element, but she was not being investigated for these drug distribution.
I had to look at what CSAM was. No, there was no indication of CP or anything on her phone. Not that I've heard of. Has anyone seen a SWAT raid IRL? It's crazy to see. Did something happen recently? I've seen like videos on YouTube, but they've been cracking down hard on like those like SWATers and stuff like that. And there was this one guy recently that got, he was sentenced recently for all the swatting that he did for in the past without the streamers. And he got like big trouble.
Distribution cases, and when we're talking drug distribution, we're not talking, Judge.
Yeah, just call it CP
about
Northwest.
cases where I'm at a party and I call somebody, hey, go grab me some dope, and they come over.
Well,
These drug
A
distribution.
lot of times in the Salt Lake Valley, that's exactly what they're serving warrants about.
I would disagree. I would say that the distribution that they're investigating at that point, when they get to that individual, they have already gone through multiple layers to identify that that one individual who is distributing a bunch of drugs has come up on the radar multiple times. They have a wire, or they have pole cams, or they're following them. It's a full-on assault on, hey, we know you have two phones. We know you're using both of them. We know that when you turn off one of them, you're turning on another, and you're calling the same individuals. There is a method to that madness. Here, yeah, they found out, or they believe they find information that she was communicating with one individual about fentanyl. They are very capable, and they do so in their affidavits. They indicate their concerns and who it is, so they have a phone number. they have a time frame, and they know what they're searching for in terms of what type of drugs. To say that because that happened, or because they have that information, that they could then go into Ms. Richins' entire phone, that's a huge step, Judge. What's more concerning to me, Your Honor, is that, go ahead.
Well, that's not the only thing they're investigating, right?
No, and I'm just, to be clear, I'm just responding to Your Honor's question.
So I understand your response there, but in addition to securing fentanyl, they're investigating the pecuniary gain piece. They're also comparing the statements that Ms. Richins made at the scene on the evening of Eric's death to activity that occurred on the phone around the same time. That includes accelerometer data, searches, location, activity on the phone, whether it was being manipulated. These are all fitting into those 11 buckets of information that are in each of the warrants.
This is where I'm concerned with this, Judge. To say that they're searching for something and then say we get to search everywhere, they don't go hand in hand. What I mean by that is if they're saying that they're searching to cross-reference what she said that night, they have the full capability of only searching for that. Rule 40 provides that when the search warrant is returned, that they must list exactly what they did, what they obtained, specific to that warrant. They didn't do that here, and they could have. They could.
Forgive me, I didn't see the...
It just indicates one extraction.
Okay, right.
There's no detail. There's no way to tell the signing judge, hey, Judge, I know we told you we were looking for this and that we were going to look for it in these 11 buckets.
Right.
Hey, Judge, here's a printout of everything that we did to make sure that we don't go beyond that.
Don't these 11 buckets, though, describe the entirety of the data available on an iPhone Pro, for example?
That's kind of the problem.
Okay.
Right? And this isn't what's... So I go back to Leon, where it gives us the exceptions, right? And, oh, well, you know what? If it's good faith. Even in Leon, though, Judge. Specifically, I think it was Judge, in the concurrence, Judge Blackman indicated, and I'll quote here, page 928 of Leon, if it should emerge from experience that, contrary to our expectations, the good faith exception to the exclusionary rule results in a material change in police compliance with the Fourth Amendment, we shall have to reconsider what we have undertaken here. The logic of a decision that rests on untested predictions about police conduct demands no less. If a single principle may be drawn from this court's exclusionary rule decisions from Weeks through Mapp to the decisions handed down today, it is that the scope of the exclusionary rule is subject to change in light of changing judicial understanding about the effects of the rule outside of the confines of the courtroom. It is incumbent on the nation's law enforcement officers who must continue to observe the Fourth Amendment in the wake of today's decision to recognize the double-edged nature of that principle. Judge, this was written in 85. We're in a wholly different world. Wholly different. And what's most concerning...
Yeah, if I remember correctly, basically all the phone information that they're getting from Kouri Richins, the reason why they want it is because Kouri Richins at the night of Eric Richins passing, she said that she left her phone by her bedside. She went into her child's room because they were having a nightmare, and she was with the child the entire time. Then all of a sudden she went back to the room, and then she noticed that Eric was unresponsive. Now, I think police was trying to debunk her story because when they did eventually get their hands on her phone, they saw that she was like taking steps back and forth, that she was actually active and that she had waited maybe possibly 10 minutes or something before calling 911. I'm not quite sure. But we had a lot of information from the phone.
Is that when the affidavit is being written, they specify what they're looking for. And they know they have the ability to limit their search into a phone to that. It is possible.
Hold on. They know the crime they're investigating. They know the potential elements of that crime. They have identified among the sources of evidence of whether that crime has occurred a mobile device belonging to the defendant that, based upon sworn statements in the probable cause, records.
Oh, yeah, I think she was texting around that time and then maybe browsing the internet, if I remember correctly.
At least 11 categories of potentially relevant information. They don't know what the information actually is, but they provide probable cause for why those 11 categories are likely to be, or support a reasonable belief that they would be, in the parlance of probable cause,
Hi, Shaniqua.
show whether the crime was committed.
I'll take issue with that, and this is why.
Can't believe I didn't see the live notification. Oh no! If you join the Discord, you can also have the Discord notification go out as well. Text a housekeeper for better pills.
To put up 11 broad categories and say, we know they exist and we know they're there. We don't know what's inside, but we know what we're looking for. That's a broad stroke because they know that within each of those boxes, those 11 categories, there's more. And they know that they can parse out even more. As an example, if they're looking for GPS locations, there's no reason why they need to go through the entire history of that phone from the moment it was turned on until shortly before the first time they believe that Miss Richins met.
So I acknowledge this argument. I looked at it hard. It seems that Fuller and Hoffman lean at least in part on the inherent limitation of the criminal conduct being investigated as the limiting principle for what you just described.
Correct.
Where you're investigating aggravated murder, you are not entitled to be searching for within the phone evidence of, I'm trying to come up with something completely different, failure to keep a dog restrained under county code. So there seems to be, in the cases, Fuller and Hoffman included, a recognition that the criminal conduct listed in the application for the search warrant, including the probable cause statement, acts as an inherent limitation on the scope of the warrant. Would you disagree?
Oh, here's
No,
the
I
Discord
agree.
link.
Okay.
The problem is,
When is the trial? Next month in April, end of April. So they're going to do jury selection end of April, and then they'll start either, I think, beginning of May. So it's coming up real close. It'll be right. Actually, it's probably going to collide with the Karen Reed trial. No.
is that any crime within digital media can give you access to the entire phone if we go down that road. The reason that these cases are very unique is because we know that those crimes with CSAM, they required the phone to create these images, to distribute the images, to store the images.
Well, maybe. There's a
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, Northwest. I just got a notification on Twitter. It's a recap thing. It says, Lori Dabo claims Jesus will exonerate her. Fuck Lori.
potential, for example, if someone has CSAM on their laptop, there is a reasonable belief, given what we know about these cases, there may be related evidence on the mobile device.
There. I agree with that. Yeah. But for example, taking your, if for some reason a judicial, there was a warrant signed by a judge saying you can go into the phone to search for whether or not this individual kept a leash on the dog.
No, I agree. So
Right.
there, the elements of that crime are so specific and so narrow
Right.
that I don't understand why we'd be searching a phone there. There, I think you have a much stronger argument. Like, what are you really asking for? You're really asking just to find out if they were in a specific location at a specific time. But aggravated murder is far more multi-layered and multifaceted.
Yes and no, because you're limited temporally.
True?
If you're trying, in one of the affidavits, they indicate, I want to know how, specifically, it was, I want to, this is O'Driscoll. Due to the contradiction of facts between the medical examiner's findings and statements made by Kouri the night of her husband's death, and due to the deleted messages,
Right?
night of the death, and statements, I'm seeking to find out how Eric ingested the fentanyl. So starting there. So perhaps a message between someone, specifically the CB.
Forgive me, which warrant specifically?
Oh, I apologize. It is warrant ending 151.
So that's Exhibit 9, right?
I believe so. The white Apple iPhone 13. And it's page 3.
I think she had both of her phones seized. She had her phone that they seized from her, and then she got a second phone. And I think that second phone is the one that revealed some of her search history searches, where she was trying to figure out when she can get the payout after Eric Richins died, I think from like life insurance policies, trying to figure out if there's like prisons for rich people. Very interesting stuff.
Okay.
So I'm seeking to find out how Eric ingested the fentanyl, how it was obtained, and by whom, from whom it was obtained, and who facilitated being obtained. Very specific what they're looking for within those 11 categories.
Right.
Right? Yet they did not do that.
Well, they imaged the phone and then
Correct.
searched for the data, right?
But they did nothing to prevent them from, or prevent going into areas The limiting area is they know they could not obtain that information.
But forgive me, I want to understand your position. Which of those 11 categories would you say cannot contain information related to that last paragraph? And mind you, this is all occurring, or all being considered in the context of, quote, affiant believes the property and evidence described above is evidence of the crime or crimes of aggravated murder.
Right. Personal and business schedules.
So if on his calendar, his iCal, he had a meeting with CL to pick up stuff, I imagine, first of all, you all would want to know that. And so would the state as potentially exculpatory evidence.
So personal and business schedules. To tell me how he ingested it on his business schedule.
Yeah, but respond to the example I just gave you. That's relevant information. It is information regarding what a person was doing or where they were going on a specific day and time.
Let me answer this. So your question, to make sure I get it clear, because I think I confused two of them. You want to know, you're saying that I would consider it relevant where he was if he met with CB on a certain date.
I think it's CL, but nonetheless.
Sorry, I thought you
Yeah.
said CB. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And you're asking if I think that's relevant.
Well, I think an investigating officer certainly would. It's potentially
Yeah.
exculpatory information if Eric is meeting with that person on a certain day and time.
So, for example, going there, it indicates I'm seeking to find out how Eric, I don't believe the schedule would indicate how,
From whom?
it was, how it was obtained, by whom, from whom it was obtained. When I look at the by whom, from whom it was obtained, I go back to the immediate paragraph, which indicates that they knew at that point that it was CB or CL that had provided the fentanyl, the alleged fentanyl. So when you look at a business schedule or a personal schedule, if I'm looking at my entire phone, then you would think that you would be able to just search, did I meet with CL? You could limit the search to that.
I understand your position, but I don't see anywhere in the case law where law enforcement is required to proceed in baby steps like that, rather than being able to proceed under probable cause to secure and search sources of information that are likely to have evidence of the crime described in the affidavit for search warrant. And part of that process necessarily requires comparing one body of information to another body of information to see where there are consistencies, connections, or inconsistencies to draw a map of the whole universe of evidence over time. And here, given the limitation regarding investigation of aggravated murder, given the potential for relevant, either inculpatory or exculpatory information being found in each of those 11 categories of information described, and I believe it's the same 11 for all 4 warrants, correct?
It is. They did not change. Correct.
And given the discussion in Fuller and Hoffman, I just don't see, one, that these are insufficiently particular or overbroad on their face, and certainly not that the executing law enforcement officers should have realized that they were.
So that's a no.
Candidly, I think the real problem is the law simply hasn't caught up to the fact that devices are surveilling us 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
Correct. And I think I guess my biggest issue with this is that we know, judges know, hopefully, that when they review this and they're being asked permission to go into, after the 10, number 11, all other digital activity. What in that phone is not digital activity?
Right.
It makes no sense.
I agree with you. When the judges are signing these, their expectation is that the phone will be forensically downloaded in its entirety.
And if that's the case, that is a big problem.
I think it would be a big problem for investigation of a unrestrained pet. I'm not sure it's a big problem in an investigation of aggravated murder that includes elements of pecuniary gain and administration of poison.
And I fully understand that. I think that the issue that I have, going back to the all other digital activity, is we have this vast amount of this technological advancement. And what we are doing right now is using that to our advantage when we deem fit. So we know that we can extract the entire, as Your Honor said, mirror the entire image. Yet our courts know and we know that they do not need to do that. That they can, when they're going into that phone, limit their search. It might be very narrow. It could be broader. The point here is that the affiant is saying, I need these specific things. I know when things happen. I know that I can limit myself in going into this phone, that there are privacy concerns. But then a signing judge says, nah, it's okay. Just go into the whole phone. That warrant was signed in 2 minutes. after it was issued to the judge.
Now, in fairness, it's not the first time I think that judge had seen that probable cause statement. Let's be careful here, right? Given the dates,
Well, we have the first one that is ending
you have to understand the judges are on signing duty for days at a time, and so when you've seen the probable cause statement on Monday, you know what it says, except for the last paragraph when they add stuff on the fourth day. So if it takes you 30 minutes the first time, it doesn't take you 30 minutes the second time.
Okay,
I just don't want there to be many misunderstandings that people are fast forwarding to the end and approving the warrant.
well, I want to make sure we had a couple of different judges, but
Truth.
point.
Yeah.
I'll end it with this. Regardless if it was 2 minutes or not, the judges have the ability to limit the scope. They know they can limit the scope. The affiant is requesting that scope that for a very limited scope, no changes are made whatsoever. That is the main concern. Is we know that we are asking for something very specific, Judge, yet we want to go into everything, and there is nothing done by the signing judges to limit that scope.
I think you've preserved that argument. Pause for just a second.
Sure.
The relief requested is an order suppressing, quote, all evidence obtained from the search of defendant's cell phone and Apple user IDs pursuant to search warrants. Is there and if your answer today is not prejudicial to you thinking about it and coming back, but
Sure.
is there a specific piece that you would say they have seized or offered as potential evidence of something in this case that is outside the scope of an investigation of aggravated murder? Because that limitation has to mean something.
I mean, the majority of what's been provided, because again, we have a mirror image.
Right.
So I think the things that they're going to use, that the state is going to use in their prosecution related to this is very, very minor.
Okay.
Yet, they've used information to gain insight into Ms. Richins' life.
Well, part of that was necessary given the financial before and after or financial status quo considerations.
Sure. I would note that and I know Your Honor has indicated it, I think, twice or three times now, the financial aspect. I want to be clear. So is Your Honor referring to the motive?
Well, one is, I think
Or
the
what the
statute, one of the
element?
aggravating factors would
Okay.
be for pecuniary gain.
Got it. And the only
I
thing...
think two are alleged here in the information, for pecuniary gain and by administration of poison.
Correct.
Yeah.
So for pecuniary gain, I don't believe in any of the affidavits that I saw. Because I would agree under, I believe it was Norris, the court indicate that if the crime permeated, that is much more difficult for the defense in this argument when it comes down to the financial portion of it.
Right.
The affidavits I've seen, the only time that something like that's referenced is in regards to her changing an individual in the life insurance.
Right.
Which was in the same affidavit indicating that that was then confirmed not to have happened. I do want to make that very specific, carve that out. I believe that the financial side of things would possibly get us to Norris, and we would be in a very difficult position as it relates to aggravated murder. Understanding the gravity of the crime, I don't believe that the information or the evidence that they were seeking allow them to go beyond a very limited, very specific portion of the phone. And by that I mean time. It could be the day leading up to the murder, the alleged murder, after, in terms of covering up, because they mentioned that in the affidavit.
Right.
And then broader, the February 14th, procuring the alleged fentanyl.
So take it out of the facts of this case, though.
Yeah.
Look, mention a hypothetical
Sure.
aggravated murder case. The same probable cause statements, the same forensic download of the entire phone, and during a keyword search for certain things, they find a string of communications between defendant and a co-conspirator dating back a year, and they find location information and some calendar entries that corroborate that these two people were meeting and communicating. Now, this is stuff they did not know when investigating, when submitting the motion,
The original
warrant.
Sure.
But it is evidence relevant to the crime of aggravated murder, in my
Right.
hypothetical.
Right.
That wouldn't be a problem, correct?
I don't think so, because you, as you indicated, they would have searched. They would have searched for a specific term.
Right. Now, is there any indication, I mean, this is a lot of data, we're going to hear from their expert at trial, but I imagine some similar process went through. Nobody paged through all the data. I don't see any indication of that.
I don't believe the issue is whether or not they paged through it. Is that when they went to copy this whole thing,
Right.
Is page through, like looking through the entire thing? Is that what they mean by it? Like going through page by page?
they copied all pages instead of just one,
Okay.
or limited to search terms, which they could have done.
Well, in my hypothetical, they do what they did here
Correct.
and do the search on
Correct.
the back end. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
I
So, for
understand,
example,
yeah.
in this, taking your hypothetical here, if they were to search for deleted data, there is a very simple checkbox that you said, hey, all deleted data, spit me out a report. We'd have no problem with that.
Okay.
Because that's what they were asking for. And it's very easy for them to know if data has been deleted and whether it can be recovered.
Okay. I understand your position.
Yeah. I don't think I have anything else.
Okay. Let me ask Mr. Blythe just a question.
Thank you, Judge.
All right,
Mr.
Mr.
Blythe,
State.
I'm inclined to deny defendant's motion to suppress electronic data, docket 745, as briefed and under the circumstances as I understand them today. However, I acknowledge that in the abstract, it's possible that the investigating authorities' journey through the forensic downloads of the phones exceeds the scope of a reasonable investigation of aggravated murder. Would you acknowledge that if that evidence were to come to light, Mr. Ramos would be within his right to come back with a more specific motion to say, wait a minute, they had no basis to search for that stuff? For CSAM, for example.
Your Honor, I guess Mr. Ramos and the defense could come back. There's also,
I mean, this would all be limited by relevance.
right, I
Or
think
free,
I think
yeah.
all the four numbers are going to kind of restrict what evidence the state presents, and they'll filter out any evidence that was kind of beyond the scope of the aggravated murder limitation
Okay.
to the warrants. I think that's how we'd address it, but I mean, I guess defense come back with whatever they want. Yeah, I don't want to say too much because the court said they were inclined to
No, I
deny.
understand. I guess what I'm
well,
trying
we're
to tease
gonna
out is
deny.
the limitation that flows from the crime being investigated, as discussed in Fuller and Hoffman. It has to mean something.
Yes, Your Honor, I agree. It does mean something.
Okay.
And I think, I guess to the court's point, that its meaning grounds in how investigators either search the material or maybe the better point is how the state uses the material.
Understood.
And I think the court will find, going forward, defense will find, the whole world will find that the state is only using material that passes all the four-number hurdles for admission into evidence in a trial on aggravated murder.
Did I not read the defense's motion to suppress the electronic data? Because I feel like I'm not as familiar with this argument. That's why I was like a little confused and quiet here. Did I skip it? Maybe I did.
Okay. I understand the state's position.
Ah, that's it? Okay, so Kouri Richins. Let me think. What are the documents that I have for Kouri Richins? Should I cover it today or a different day? This is probably a total of, it's not that bad actually. It's like 50 pages. It's not bad. But oh my God, are they very interesting. This is a list of all the financial crime stuff that the state is planning to present in the trial. And then this was arguing about the walk the dog letter. They're still arguing about that. But oh my gosh. In here though, the state gives a chronology of timeline leading up to the walk the dog letter and why the walk the dog letter should not be suppressed. And it's kind of wild because Kouri Richins and her mom, they reveal so much in these jailhouse phone calls. Jeez. I don't think we have the transcript of the phone calls, but that would be nice. But we do have like little excerpts from it. Oh my gosh. Wild. Ah. All right. So before we jump to the documents, I think I will read them. Should I read the documents today? I gotta put my glasses though. Hello, we will cover the document in a separate video. It's coming out, it should be coming out after this video. That way it's shorter. But oh my gosh, guys, the documents are crazy, in my opinion. Now, enjoy the recap. The hearing so far. So the hearing happened last week. This was a hearing for a motion to suppress. We had motion to suppress the phone that was seized. There were oral statements that was made while she was detained, while they were searching her home. There were also oral statements that she made the day afterwards when Sergeant O'Driscoll came by to introduce himself and he was invited into her home. At some point, Kouri Richins' mom mentioned attorney and was like, oh, don't you need an attorney to be present? There were handwritten statements. These were from the orange notebook that was seized about a month after the oral statements. And initially, like I mentioned, Kouri Richins tried to say that the notebook was physician-patient privilege, which sounds like bullshit. It seems like I think the orange notebook was a diary of the days leading up to the murder and maybe even afterwards. Because I do remember a diary being referenced a few times when we were listening to the Kouri Richins hearing. But I tried to skim through my notes really quick and I couldn't find it. But I know they're here somewhere. There was a diary mentioned. I was like, oh my fucking God, she did not write a fucking diary. She did not document some stuff that would be used against her. Oh my goodness. Okay. Anyways, the state was trying to, or actually no, I guess we'll just do the recap because I was going to go through more now. We'll just do the recap because the recap pretty much covers everything. All right, so we started with the defense. Suppress evidence from the phone. They're trying to argue that the phone was not taken from Kouri's person. However, the state is saying that it was taken from her person. So again, what happened was the law enforcement had a search warrant to search Kouri Richins' home. They pulled up and they noticed that she was leaving the property. She was driving off. So one of the officers went and basically signaled her lights and asked her to step out of the car and basically, let's go back to the house. You're under custody at this point. Now, the officer said that they saw Kouri Richins' phone in the cup holder, that it was within her reach. So technically, they could have taken her phone at that time. However, they didn't. The defense is trying to say that, well, that's a huge issue right there because technically the phone was in the car. It's not part of the property of the home. The police didn't have a right to seize the phone at that time. But that's where the state and the defense, that's where they're going to have a difference in opinion. And so at some point, Kouri Richins was brought back to the house. And I think 20 minutes in, they told her, go get your phone from the car. She goes gets the phone. She brings it back. And initially when I was reading Kouri Richins' motion, they made it seem like law enforcement was like, hey, go get your phone. She brings it back. Okay, give me your passcode. And then she gave them the passcode because she had no other choice but to give her the passcode because she would be told that, she wouldn't be free otherwise. That was the impression that I got in my head. But then we got more context from the state essentially saying that, well, the passcode was only asked because Kouri Richins wanted to, when they took Kouri Richins' phone, she was like, oh, I need some contacts in there. And they're like, okay, well, what's your passcode? And she gave them the passcode. Interesting. Anyways, the defense was trying to say that the phone was not contraband. They didn't have a right to take the phone away from her. However, the judge is saying, well, he does believe that the phone is contraband. All right. Next one is suppressing statements that was made at the home. So this is where the defense is trying to say that her Fifth and Sixth Amendment were violated. Fifth Amendment was, what is it again? The incriminating statement one. So you have a right to not make any incriminating statements against yourself. And the Sixth Amendment was you have a right to representation. So at that point, I think the judge was saying that Sixth Amendment, the right for representation, was not attached because technically she was not in custody at that point. And then Fifth Amendment, the making incriminating statements. What did the judge say? Why did I have not notes about that? I think maybe similar, maybe. They were saying that she wasn't in custody at that point. No, it was something else. Sorry, I don't remember. I don't know why I don't have notes about this. Okay, now let's go to the Orange Notebook. Defense, suppressing written statements in the Orange Notebook. Person who had access to the house would not rearrange. Oh, okay. So the state was basically making an argument that this was in the motion or the reply to the defense's motion. But the state was saying that initially when they did have a search warrant and they came across this Orange Notebook, they didn't have a right to open it and read the contents of it. However, the state was trying to say that, well, that home would have been preserved anyways because they interviewed someone who had access to the home and that person wouldn't have removed any items in the house anyway. So when they would come back later on with other subsequent search warrants, they would have came across the Orange Notebook at some point. And the defense was trying to say, well, why would they really come across an Orange Notebook? It's an Orange Notebook. It's a child's Orange Notebook. And the judge was saying, well, actually, because she's being charged with financial fraud, it would make sense to go through the paper trail documents, right? People writing things in notebooks or maybe having documents laying around and stuff like that. So at some point, it seems like the notebook probably would have been discovered later on. And of course, the defense, they disagree with that. State's response. This is about the blurts. So apparently Kouri Richins maybe made some blurts when she was with law enforcement. I think the judge was asking the state, well, wouldn't a reasonable person believe that they were not free to go at that time? The state says that doesn't matter. The judge says, well, it does matter in the custodial part of a custodial interrogation. However, I think, let's see, I think the judge, there's some back and forth. Oh, the state clarifies that the blurts that were being made by Kouri Richins, it was essentially the Detective Woody, saying, well, the medical examiner got a toxicology report, and it found that there was fentanyl in Eric Richins' blood. And then Kouri Richins blurts out, "Fentanyl? What's that?" Cut crack. And it's interesting for her to pretend to not know what fentanyl is because, now we have cell phone records of her obtaining fentanyl from her housekeeper, not once, but I think like twice, maybe even 3 times. Okay, automobile exception. The phone in arm's reach could have seized it pursuant to the warrant, which I already covered it. Again, they clarified how they were able to get to the passcode from Kouri Richins' phone is because she wanted the contacts out of the phone. Same thing with the orange notebook. We went over that earlier, how they said the same detective would have discovered at some point anyways in the future search warrants. Okay, so this one was a little bit hard for me to follow because I guess I didn't read the motion for this one. I might have missed it. So this is when the defense, Mr. Ramos, was arguing the motion to suppress the electronic data. I think the defense was trying to say that it was too broad, the search warrant. The judge, however, said there was no case law where law enforcement is required to proceed in baby steps, so working tiny little steps, rather than being able to proceed in a probable cause to secure/search sources of information that are likely to have evidence of crime described in the affidavit. So the defense was arguing that it felt like it was too broad because there's no time frame restrictions, maybe. But the judge did say that they didn't see it as insufficiently particular over broad. The real problem is that the law had not caught up, which is essentially when the law was written, back then we didn't have the technology that we had now, which is with cell phones, right? So they're slowly catching up. But I mean, imagine like how much information you can get off of your cell phone. With Kohberger's case, how much information can you get from your Amazon account, right? Your purchases, now there's like Amazon Pharmacy, your medication, and then there's like the Alexa app, or is it Alexa? Alexa's Amazon, right? Yeah. So Amazon is like they can have a lot of information on you. So that was a problem in the Kohberger case. For the judge, he said he's not sure if it's a big problem in an investigation of aggravated murder that includes elements of monetary gain and the administration of poison, which is what she's being accused of. And the defense was saying that, well, they could, if they wanted to make it not so broad, they can look at the day leading up to the murder, maybe the day afterwards for cover up, and then February 14 when she would have procured the fentanyl. But after the defense argued, the judge did say to the state that he's already inclined to deny the defense's motion anyways for the electronic data motion. But I got to go back and read it because I guess I missed it. You're taking out the trash? Oh, I know. The trash be showing up everywhere, dude. What's up, Bleep? It was trash day for me, too. I feel like it's so nice when you, take the trash out, and then, the bins come back empty. It's like, oh, yes, amazing. Okay, so